Hello and welcome back to the Corruptive Chaos channel. I'm your host Corbin, and today, yes, we're doing yet another Blu-ray pickups video. Aren't you excited? So in today's video, yes, we are back to more physical media when it comes to film. I have more Blu-ray pickups and one 4K film as well. As I explained in my previous video where I discussed going to Texas Frightmare Weekend, which was a horror convention in Dallas at the end of April and the start of May, you're usually going to get the best prices actually in person if you're at a horror convention where these boutique Blu-ray labels are. But when it comes to Arrow Video, I was lucky enough that I was able to pick up a lot of what I wanted from their site, their US site, recently. Actually, at the beginning of May. This was actually the day that the convention ended, back on May 1st, I believe. And they came shortly thereafter. So we'll be going over those titles that I got from Arrow Video's Easter sale. We'll start it off with The Chill Factor. This is a sort of snow set, supernatural horror film. People are possessed, things ensue. I will be going over whether or not I've seen a film. There are a number of titles that I haven't seen. And there are a number of titles that I've only seen after I actually got the Blu-ray. So within the last month or so. I did see The Chill Factor fairly recently, or most of it anyway. I quite enjoyed this. As it says on the back of Arrow Video's disc here, it says The Exorcist meets the Winter Olympics. Which I guess is a neat little quirky tagline to throw in there. So, there's on with our first title. Moving on to number 2. Next, we have The Stuff. This is a Larry Cohen film, basically about Killer Froyo. I actually enjoyed this a surprising amount. I had seen this before I got the Arrow Video Blu-ray. I was actually blown away by how much I enjoyed it. I thought it would just be some cheesy B-movie, which in a way it is. But also, it has pretty good performances, great practical effects, and while Larry Cohen, a pretty famous cult director, I guess, within horror circles, as I've done in previous haul videos, he directed the It's Alive trilogy, which I thoroughly enjoy, so that kind of took me down a rabbit hole of watching other Larry Cohen films. This actually has kind of a commentary on consumerism and marketing, and people will buy whatever companies sort of tell them to buy through marketing. This was a load of fun. If you want to just see a bunch of cool practical effects taking over people's bodies with kind of a fun message in there, check it out. The Stuff. Our next Arrow Video title is Chud, which, if you want to know what Chud stands for, you're going to have to watch the film. Yes, this is an acronym. Once again, this is kind of a film, I just thought it would be some cheesy 80s B-movie. I'd seen this one actually quite a while ago before picking up the Blu-ray this month. It is pretty cheesy. Once again, pretty great practical effects, which I very much appreciate. You have these weird zombie-esque creatures. From the cover, you can kind of see, anyway, that you have these creatures underground. They do live in the sewers. Also should be noted, all these Arrow Video titles, not just Chud, filled with special features, and they do present the best, technically best, sound and video quality. Chud is a 2K film transfer. Now we can move on to 3 Arrow Video box sets that I picked up during their Easter sale at the beginning of the month. First off here is the Daimajin trilogy. I would have said before I had seen the first one, just very recently, that these are kaiju flicks. I love kaiju movies. I'm a big fan of Godzilla and Gamera. I have the Arrow Video releases of all of the Gamera films, which are fantastic. Both, having a blast with the films and Arrow Video's actual release of those titles. But here, anyway, the cover art, you have a giant monster. It gives the impression of that. If you read any sort of synopsis, it makes it sound like a Japanese kaiju flick from the 60s. But really, for the most part of what I've heard, the first and second act are really feudal samurai flicks. Plus, that makes it kind of unique for kaiju flicks because usually they're science fiction movies that are set in present day, at least present day when they were made. For instance, Godzilla and Gamera, those are all set when they were released, basically. But here, these Daimajin films talk about sort of feudal legends and mysticism. You have characters praying to statues, and they want to sort of call that statue into existence, the Majin, to help them in whatever struggle they have in particular films. I've heard this trilogy is pretty formulaic, but most kaiju films are kind of formulaic, so that doesn't really bother me. I really enjoy Japanese kaiju flicks, but regardless though, I'm a big fan of sort of Akira Kurosawa and Japanese filmmaking from basically the 50s, 60s, where a lot of samurai flicks were being produced and made. And so this kind of fits the bill in that area too. So if you don't like giant monster flicks, you could probably enjoy this if you also like sort of Japanese samurai period pieces. Next, we have the Sergio Martino collection. This is a box set of 3 films as well, from Arrow Video once again. Here's one of them. This is The Case of the Scorpion's Tail by Sergio Martino. Sergio Martino was a Italian film director who made plenty of genre films, but he made many giallo films. This is something I went over also in my previous video. Giallo is basically a subgenre of sort of thrillers and murder mysteries. They were primarily made in Italy. I did talk about a different Sergio Martino flick in my previous video from Texas Frightmare. Severin Films has also released at least a couple of his flicks as well. As I said in that video, Martino tends to focus more on the romance and sort of character arcs between our protagonist, man and woman usually, whereas maybe a more famous giallo director like Dario Argento focuses more on the fantasy and weirder aspects of Italian filmmaking. So as I said, here's one of the titles. This might be my favorite from this box set, The Case of the Scorpion's Tail. But also, we get Your Vice is a Locked Room and Only I Have the Key. I really like this reversible cover art here. Really freaky, with 2 heads in a keyhole. And then we have The Suspicious Death of a Minor. All 3 of these films, pretty great starts for giallo and Italian, specifically giallo filmmaking. If you're interested, this would be a good place to start. But we'll also be talking about another good place to start with a different Arrow Video box set. The last Arrow Video title, or really box set that I want to talk about, is this Giallo Essentials box. This is kind of a new line of box sets Arrow Video is putting out. They already put out one box set before this, which, in my opinion, contains some lesser gialli. This one, though, definitely worth the pickup. Arrow will also be having another Giallo Essentials box set. They're doing it based on color. The first one was red. This one is yellow, obviously. And then they'll be putting out a black box set later on in the year. This is a cool box. It actually has an O card here that goes over this pretty sturdy box. This contains Torso, yet another Sergio Martino film. What Have You Done to Your Daughters? And Stripped Nude for Your Killer. I've only seen Torso out of this box set first. That's kind of the title that made me want to get all 3 films, but I've heard they're pretty great. Torso, I would argue, is probably Sergio Martino's best film. I think it's his most famous, no doubt. So I'll show off these cases really quick. Here is Stripped Nude for Your Killer. All of the cover art as well for Arrow. Always really spectacular. They don't skimp when it comes to these really great Blu-ray releases. You got special features. You're getting kind of obscure films that haven't been put into the mainstream. And you're getting great cover art. I also believe that these were also all 2K transfers, which just means, they're restoring the film in a really quality way. I'm not really on the technical side of it. I know that, there are 4K transfers that also get put out on Blu-rays, not just 4K UHD discs, but it's just to make the quality as high as possible when they come out on any basically HD format. Then here's Torso. Great cover art here. It's not really subtle at all in telling you what is going to happen in the film. And then lastly, we have What Have They Done to Your Daughters? I quite like this cover art as well. I'm kind of supposing that when I watch it, the killer, who is going to be unidentified probably until the third act, is going to be wearing a sort of motorcycle outfit. And, well, we'll see what kills ensue from there on out. Alright, well, that sums it up for Arrow Video. Like I said, I was basically able to get all that I wanted from the Easter sale that I was unable to get actually in person when I went to the convention earlier in the month. But here we go, moving on to other titles that I probably would have got anyway, except for a stack that we have over here. Another one is Malignant on 4K. This is from Warner Brothers. Malignant did come out in mid-September of last year, 2021. Unfortunately, it only got a Blu-ray release there on out, you know, just whatever, a couple months later.
Who are you, Gabriel?
This was actually one of my favorite films of 2021. Probably Malignant and Pig were my top two. I absolutely loved this James Wan flick. It had his slick directing style that, you know, you'd be familiar if you've seen either The Conjuring 2, or his Insidious flicks. But this was cool because I think it kind of was a throwback to certain types of genre films that I really enjoy. Specifically Giallo, that I've already gone through with Arrow Video. The killer is kind of a Giallo-esque killer that you're trying to figure out who it is. It does just go off the rails in the third act. If you haven't seen Malignant, I highly recommend it. I believe you can see it on HBO Max now, but I wanted to see it in its highest quality version on an actual UHD disc. Next we have Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. This is the 1941 version. This also just came out. Malignant came out this week, this past Tuesday. This came out the Tuesday prior, so, you know, mid-May. This had yet to be on Blu-ray. Thanks to the fine folks at Warner Archive, it is now released in full glory HD. It should be noted that this is basically a remake of the 1931 version, which Warner Archive has already shown interest that they are in the process of restoring currently. This, though, it stars Spencer Tracy and Ingrid Bergman in sort of the two romantic roles, although Lana Turner is also in sort of his engagement role. If you're familiar with the Jekyll Hyde story, you know exactly what this is going to be, and I think basically everyone knows what that is by this point. I would say the 1931 film is superior. That stars Frederick March. He's great in that. I don't think Spencer Tracy is as good of a Hyde. He plays Jekyll all right, I suppose. But I've mostly got this because I like Jekyll and Hyde, and, well, I like the top two billed actors, Tracy and Bergman. I think the biggest downfall to this, besides being basically a remake of a film that came out 10 years prior, is that the makeup in this is pretty subpar. When Spencer Tracy transforms into Hyde, he looks a lot just like Spencer Tracy. He doesn't look like a monstrous creature human that Mr. Hyde looks like in other adaptations. Here, they kind of just put on some extra makeup around his face to sort of buff out his features. They change his hairstyle and they make his eyebrows bigger. But really, his voice isn't changed. I think it's kind of breaking the suspension of disbelief, trying to think that no one would easily figure it out that Hyde is actually Jekyll. Still, though, I'd probably have to recommend it. I still had fun with it. I do like these old-timey sort of adaptations of classic horror stories. So there's that. So lastly, I've got quite the stack of full moon films. That's right. Just last video, I talked about how I have not seen many full moon films at all. Obviously, a company made by Charles Band. They were all direct-to-video back in the day. Even though that most of them were shot on 35mm, which is awesome because then you can restore them later on the Blu-ray format. But here, like I said in my Texas Frightmare video, if you signed up for Full Moon's streaming service app for 1 year, you actually got a pretty big chunk of stuff physically at the convention, but also you got an online redemption code that you could use at a third-party site to get 10 Blu-rays of whatever you wanted that are Full Moon films. So, I'll try to go through these fairly quickly. Most of these I'm not familiar with at all. I will say if I have seen any of them, which is just a few. So here we go. Here we have Dragon World. I think this is the only kids film basically on this list. I think the rest were probably rated R or have scarier elements than this. This definitely looks like a family film that you can enjoy with kids. A lot of Full Moon stuff, like I have here, you can't really. Next, we have Dr. Mordred. I got this mostly because it stars Jeffrey Combs. I like Jeffrey Combs in Reanimator, and he's in some other Full Moon stuff. He is a frequent collaborator with Stuart Gordon, and I do have some Stuart Gordon flicks in this pile here. Charles Band apparently did have the rights to Doctor Strange, the Marvel character, for a while, but eventually passed on them. So then, instead, after he had lost the rights, I believe, he made Dr. Mordred, which is basically a Doctor Strange ripoff. So this isn't really horror, I don't think. It's going to be more spectacular and fantastical. But yeah, I think if I know Doctor Strange, I'll probably know this sort of generic story that's probably going to come with Dr. Mordred. Next, we have a few films in this franchise, which is Subspecies. These are vampire flicks. I've got more sequels here. I got these mostly because I like vampires. These looked interesting. The vampire looked more like a sort of Nosferatu gross vampire, which interests me more than maybe the sort of Bela Lugosi type romanticizing of vampires. These, of course, are from the 90s. This is when vampires became sort of romantic again with, the Anne Rice adaptations or potentially Coppola's adaptation of Bram Stoker's Dracula as well. So these look weird. So here we go, Subspecies 2. More vampires. Have not seen them yet. Yeah, believe these were all filmed in Romania. That's all I got to add to this one. Bloodlust, Subspecies 3. Once again, not much to add. Hope to see it. Hope to like it. These are all directed by Ted Nicolau, which he was a frequent Full Moon director that I know of anyway. And well, that's also about all I have to add for this third Subspecies film. Next, we have Demonic Toys. Charles Band seems to love puppets or little inanimate objects. Things like toys, little dolls, little toys. This was reminiscent of Puppet Master. I have now seen Puppet Master 1 and 2. This is very similar. I also watched this recently. I do think that this also could have became its own franchise. The stop motion is pretty good in this. The sort of puppeteering, also pretty good. I think there is a certain pacing, though, to these Full Moon flicks. They are kind of slow. They seem very strictly structured in a classic 3-act kind of Hollywood structure. But, there is a lot of charm to be had. These aren't really hard R-rated films as well. There's definitely blood and gore for people who like that, like myself. But they're more charming than anything, I think. Here is an adaptation of The Pit and the Pendulum, an Edgar Allan Poe story. This was directed by Stuart Gordon. I had seen this quite a while back. I think Lance Henriksen is pretty great in this. He plays a wonderful villain. But it also stars Jeffrey Combs, like I said, a frequent collaborator with Stuart Gordon. I don't have too much to say about this. The Pit and the Pendulum, also sort of a well-known story. I know there's a famous Vincent Price adaptation from the 60s. This is pretty good. I think the period piece aspect of it is done fine. There is enough blood and gore as well in this to satisfy fans of the horror genre. I do think that Stuart Gordon was probably Full Moon's biggest asset. His directing is really impressive, even in these lower budgeted flicks. that were really always intended to go direct to video. Next, we have Castle Freak. This is yet another Stuart Gordon film. This, instead of being a Poe adaptation, this is another H.P. Lovecraft adaptation. I think probably the filmmaker most associated with H.P. Lovecraft is probably Stuart Gordon, having directed Reanimator, From Beyond, Dagon, and Castle Freak. This is a pretty nasty one. Jeffrey Combs and Barbara Crampton, the two of the 3 stars in Reanimator. They're both great in this. They play a couple. They are basically filming this off in some, Italian castle that I believe was actually Charles Band's castle. Weird makeup, also directed pretty well, even though it's more of a lowbrow sort of adaptation than probably what H.P. Lovecraft was going for with his more science fiction kind of aspects. Here we have Lurking Fear. This will be short. I got this because it's yet another H.P. Lovecraft adaptation from Full Moon. The cover art, fine enough. That also sold me on getting it. I know that Jeffrey Combs also has a small performance in this. That just adds to me also getting it, I suppose. Lastly, in the stack from Full Moon, this is our 10th one. This is Blade, the Iron Cross. This is a more recent spin-off of the Puppet Master franchise. Probably the most famous puppet from Puppet Master is Blade. He's kind of the main puppet that kills for Toulon. And yeah, I don't know what to expect really. I've only seen one recent Full Moon film. I was not hugely impressed. It should be noted that all of what I just talked about, I believe all of them, are from the 90s. This is when Charles Band, he was making films professionally in Italy, in Rome, and then later in Romania. Like the Subspecies films, I believe all of those were filmed in Romania. Blade the Iron Cross, on the other hand, I believe it's from, let's see, this is only from 2019, so only 3 years ago. And so we'll see how it is. I wonder how well the effects hold up in this, if they're still actually even doing sort of traditional puppeteering or not. We'll have to check it out, but it's probably on my last of to-do list. I'll probably want to check it out after I've watched all of the Puppet Master films. Alright, thank you everyone for watching this Blu-ray haul video. I am passionate about Blu-ray sort of collecting. I don't really like to call it collecting because, well, I actually watch everything that I get. A lot of collectors I know, they just have shelves full and they probably will never re-watch some of the things that they have. Me, on the other hand, most of what I have, overwhelmingly, I'd probably re-watch maybe years down the line, which is the whole point. But also, I get Blu-ray also because you're getting the best quality version of a film. It's not cropped, it has a great transfer, you don't have to worry about streaming difficulties. Like I said at the beginning of the video, I did put in my Vinegar Syndrome order for their halfway to Black Friday sale. That's kind of a big deal in the Blu-ray crowd. That'll probably be my next haul video when we're in the sort of blue tablecloth again. So be checking that out. Orders are probably going to start shipping in mid-June. So that probably won't be for a while, but I'm looking forward to getting all of the titles that I got. So thanks for watching, everyone. If you made it this far, why don't you consider subscribing or liking the video or even dropping a comment down below on what you thought of my pickups.